professor Ion, também temos a participação do doutorado Joaquim, e, como de prática, nós temos 1 hora para discussão, vocês podem abrir ao final para algumas perguntas, e falar a vocês, tá? Muito obrigado.
So, good afternoon, everybody. As was announced, I'm going to be talking in English because you understand more English than I can speak Portuguese. I think that's fine. That's a good bargain, yes? He talks various languages. You know, he can Portuguese if he wishes. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start talking, and Joaquin will also talk whenever he feels that he should add something. And then we will open up for questions. We have a very short time. We'll try and get through the whole thing, even though it might be more convenient to break at some point so that we can discuss various issues. Now, what we're going to talk to you about, and I cannot give you all the information. I cannot even tell you the methodology, because that would bore you, first of all. So I've decided to give you some results, some initial results, so that you can see what is possible. Yes? And there's a lot of justification for these results, and I'm only going to give you 2, which are 2 of the more simple ones as well. That way I can give you a little bit of context, I can give you some results, and then you can see, you know, where this thing is going. Our interest is in a very basic activity called the literature review, which all of us in research have to do if we ever plan to write a doctorate or a research paper, or even more basically, if we plan to be scholars, if we plan to know about our field. Now, this particular activity, the literature review, this is me talking, this is educational researchers talking for the last 15 years, is not being taken seriously enough. Researchers like to go out and do their surveys, gather statistics, do some analysis, and present some results. And they say, you know, this is active research, and we are contributing to the world and things like this. And everybody, that's what they say. Most people tend to forget or to minimize the value of the literature review. As a result, after examining numerous research projects and theses and all this, people in educational research are saying a lot of the results from research do not match the field in which they are applied, because people have forgotten to examine the literature. And also, a lot of the results that have come out are contradictory, or they do not make sense according to the field in which they are applied. And all this because people are ignoring a basic activity which I call studious reading. Not just reading, but studious reading. Examining papers, reading them repeatedly over and over again, becoming critical about them, and knowing, as you would know, your favorite book. So this is where we are. We are talking about how to make literature reviews better. Okay? Now, in case you think that literature reviewing is a simple process, there are actually 11 activities involved in literature reviewing. Okay, this is a list from one of the top people who writes about literature reviews. His name is Chris Hart, and he wrote a best-selling book called I can't remember the title. Do you remember the title? Reviewing Literature, something like this. Anyway, it's in the library. Chris Hart. His book, published in the late 1990s, has become the Bible of literature reviewing for people who write about literature reviews, who write about the methodology, the process. These people tend to publish in journals that have to do with a field called educational research. Educational research has a huge society in the States, the American Educational Research Association, AERA, and they have 8 journals, these people. Not just any old society. This is a huge society, and they publish 8 journals. And a number of these journals have to do with literature reviews, and all of them publish papers about literature reviews. And Chris Hart, who is British, not American, he wrote this book in the late 1990s, which has become like the primary Bible of literature reviews, and this is his list. Now, since the late 1990s, the Americans now, because the British have sort of ignored Chris Hart. The British tend to be like that. You know, they have their heroes, which they then ignore. It's like Churchill. You know, he won the war, but let's kick him out of office. He never got voted again. So, you know. Chris Hart became famous in the States, and the Americans took this list and they created evaluation rubrics, which means when you deliver your literature review or your thesis, let's say, to a banca, yeah, they will have evaluation criteria for each one of these things. And they will mark your thesis according to how well you've done each of the, according to certain criteria. And the one thing that the Americans have not been able to do is this one here. The one that I've put in bold. Understanding the structure of the subject. In one of the more famous papers in the educational research literature, published in 2005 by the Americans, they explicitly said this criteria or this activity, they called it too ambiguous to evaluate. Now that's not good enough. You know, you have a society that publishes 8 journals, and they can't deal with a straightforward sentence, and they can't come up with some sort of rubric for this. So Joaquin and I have been sitting down in Cabral for the last 2 years, once a week, debating this issue. We've been saying, you know, well, what can we do about this? What is understanding? What is structure? What is subject? And we think we've come up with a way forward. It is not an easy way forward, but none of the evaluation rubrics for these things are. But at least it points the way to a certain potential, we think. So this is what we'd like to share with you now. So we are here then, okay? This is what we're doing. Now, where do we start? There are a number of starting points. I just want to share with you 2 starting points. First of all, this is Robert George Collingwood. He's one of the most famous British historians of the 20th century. His forte is that he was not just a historian or even an archaeologist. He was an excellent Roman archaeologist of Roman Britain. He was actually a philosopher of history. He wrote books and papers regarding how to do history. And one of his major insights, which is actually in his autobiography, 140 pages, a very short book, it's an intellectual autobiography. And if you want to know about Robert Collingwood, you should just read that, because that is really a fantastic treatise on how to do history. It's less about him and about his activity. And it's called Autobiography. That's all it's called. Robert George Collingwood Autobiography. And he says this, which I think is very profound. You cannot tell what a proposition means, or in other words, you cannot tell what I'm talking to you about unless you know what question it is meant to answer. Unless I give you the question that I am trying to answer, you will never know what I'm talking about. So throughout these slides, I have questions. This is the format of the presentation in a moment, and I'm going to give you some handouts so that you can follow it. There will be questions for everything that I'm doing. That way you will see how I am addressing the question, what answer I am giving to the question. This is profound in another sense. We are trained to think about hypotheses. You go to a research methodology course and you're told, well, when you do your doctorate, you should have, 3 hypotheses. I put it to you that this is false. I'm going to be very polemic here. We're in the social sciences, and the social sciences have a habit, a very dangerous, a very bad habit. It's like smoking, of borrowing things from physics, uncritically, and from mathematics. Hypothesis comes from the hard sciences. You can hypothesize and then you can experiment in the laboratory. Hypotheses in social science, as far as I'm concerned, are the wrong way to go. The right way to go is this. Ask the right question. Ask a concise, exact question, and then you'll be able to answer it. Or at least you'll be able to research it. This thing about hypotheses and proving the hypothesis and all this does not come from our field. This is a borrowed concept which we need to be very careful with. So unless you're going to do some mathematics and statistics and all this other hard stuff, then fine, do that. But I put it to you that in the social sciences, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. We should be asking better questions. So I'm with Collingwood. Tell me what your question is, and then I can judge whether your answer is correct. Here are some guiding questions. These are the general, overarching questions that have guided what Joaquin and I have been doing. You have an abundance of literature. You're going to review a literature, you're going to have to read 150, 200 papers, out of which you're going to choose maybe 100, maybe 80, maybe 50. Yeah? You have this abundance. How can you materialize this, make it tangible? Papável. Is that in Portuguese? Yeah?
Yeah.
Into a legible, you have to be able to read it. Visible, you have to be able to see it. Dynamic, it has to be in time. People write a paper today, then they get cited tomorrow. This is a dynamic process. You have to incorporate time into contiguities and relationships. How can the construction of knowledge, in other words, this literature that has constructed this knowledge, its underlying superstructure or network of pipelines be shown? And we'll see what pipelines are in a minute. How can connected understandings between scholars be shown? A paragraph in your literature review, oh, you know, Georgiou said this, and you happen to cite Peck. That doesn't tell me a lot. I'd like to see this. I'd like to see how it happened. So this thing about visual is going to be very important in what we're about to tell you. How might the transcendental features, the overarching general features and patterns of the field, there are certain patterns that you can make explicit in the literature. And what are the structure is going to be important here, structurally transparent facts that facilitate informed communication to third parties. I want to be able to give you something that you can understand about literature without me really telling you too much about it. It should be transparent to you. You shouldn't have to call me up tomorrow and say, what did you mean by that? It should be completely transparent. You should be able to take it away and read it for yourself, or look at it visual for yourself. The other basis comes from Gerald Holton. If you ever want to know about Einstein, read Gerald Holton. He is the only man who's had complete access to the Einstein archives. And he's written books about Einstein, and it's not just biographies, it's about the way Einstein worked. So if you want to understand how one of the greatest minds that ever lived actually worked in his thinking processes, read Gerald Holton. And he says in one of his many publications, to understand the history of science, in other words, to understand the literature, we need first of all to do two things. To understand thoroughly many of the individual main events. What are events in literature? A paper is an event. A publication is an event. Okay? Events in the history of a science. Events, not speculative constructs. Oh, what is a speculative construct? Oh, that author is postmodern. Oh, that author, postmodern is the best example. You know what I mean? All these judgments we impose on people without actually reading what the hell they're talking about. So, look at the event. Read the event. Do not listen to what other people are saying about the event. So, events. And the second thing is to see the connections between many of these events. So, items and connections between them. So, we have taken these two guys out of many other people that I cannot share with you today, and we've put them together, and we're going to be asking questions, and we're going to be putting together the connections between events. That is basically the approach that we've taken to literature reviews. Now, to help you with this, we will pass out some of the copies of the slides so that you can see what is going on. So, if we then consider Gerald Holton, we have events, which for us will be published sources like papers and books. And we have the connections. And what are connections between published papers and books? They are the citations. There is no connection between two papers unless they are cited. If they're not cited, one to another, then there's no connection. So obviously the first thing that comes to mind is, what we should do is we should build a citation network of our literature. Yeah? Nice, easy answer. So here you go. Papers, connections between them, and off you go. Now, how would you go about building a citation network? Because I'm telling you here, do we want a citation network? Not quite. Okay? Not quite. But let's just pause here and ask ourselves, how would you go about building a citation network? How have you been trained? Or maybe that's too strong. How have you heard about building citation networks? You've been told to go to Thomson Reuters, Google Scholar, Scopus, download a whole bunch of papers based on a keyword search, and there's a facility in the system that builds a citation map for you. Yeah? Right, I want you to forget all that. Because the minute you automate stuff, you make people stupid. And we're not here to be stupid. We're here to do things that are for real, substantial. Okay? We're not here to automate the activities that make us what we are. If you want to be a scholar, you have to do the hard work of, like I said, studious reading. Anyone. A 5-year-old kid can go into Scopus, download a whole bunch of things based on a keyword, and have a map drawn for them. That's not what we want to do. We do not want this. Not quite. Not quite. What we want is a visual pro-thesis. A pro-thesis is something that is available that will help you build up your thesis. And it has to be visual, which will help you interpret, make sense of a literature. We want to chart the literature. Chart was the old Latin word for maps, and we're going to be talking a lot about maps in a minute. We want to chart the literature. We want a means through which can be explained not only the events, but the relations, not only the facts, but the nature of their evolution. How did things become what they are? Again, this thing about time. You have to incorporate the time issue into your thinking. To impose onto the literature a logic, a certain logic, specified by composition, which maps will we show, an arrangement, where will the maps be placed, and the relationships among the maps. As you all know, that's what an atlas does. You know, the World Atlas, you open up the World Atlas, what do you have? You have the world map, then you have the continent maps, then you have the country maps, a few of them have city maps, some of them have river maps, mountain maps, whatever. Yeah, but that is basically the gradation of a World Atlas. Those should be done of a subject. We propose that you should start with a world map of your literature, the equivalent of a world map, maps, and that way you build an atlas which you deliver. This is my literature review. Church. Here it is. Maps that explain various things, or that serve, if not explain, that serve to stimulate discussion about these things. So, about this atlas. Joaquin, so far so good? Okay. Our task. Pose questions, Collingwood. Yeah, we're going to be doing that in a minute. Answer them by referring to particular events and the relations between them. That's Holden. And math. Okay, that must be very simple. Okay? How you do it after that, then you need some basic skills. But let's just talk about the results. We propose a 3-tier atlas structure. And our language, you know, these terms here, our language is not ours. Our language is directly rooted in educational research. We do not, in other words, we're not arrogant enough. This is what we're going to invent. No. We will root ourselves as much as possible in the people who know what they're talking about in literature reviews. And those people are the educational researchers. So when they say coverage, I will adopt that term. Coverage means give me the overarching world map. That's coverage. Tell me, you know, what you have covered in general. Within coverage, tell me 2 things. Tell me some things about the sources. What are sources? Papers, books, published material. And also tell me where they're published. Tell me something about the media in which they're published, the journals, the publishers, the conferences. Okay, so we have, if you like, papers and journals, to keep it simple. Okay? So, give me an overarching view that delineates the topical, the temporal, the evolution of the literature that you're going to be reviewing. Give me the constitutive elements, which are the papers that make up the literature. Tell me about where they're published. 3 interrelated in this atlas. So far, so good? Okay. So let's start with coverage. Okay. So we have coverage part 1. This is, as we said, that's the definition. What are the questions that we're trying to answer? This can be very important that you bear this in mind. We are offering answers to particular questions. We're not saying these are the right questions. We're just saying these sound like pretty good questions. You might come up with better questions. We might come up with better questions next year. I don't know. But at least we have some questions already for each of the maps. It's how can confidence be attained? Confidence in you and confidence in the bank. That the inclusion, or more generally the selection of the sources, has been purposeful and thorough. How can I gain this confidence? How might the scope or the coverage of a literature review be arranged and delineated? How do you arrange this stuff into a world sort of type of map? How might an otherwise indescribably complex knowledge domain, if I ask you about the literature that you are dealing with in your research, we can be here all day. It's an indescribably complex domain. You know, you will need a couple of hours to tell me about this literature. It is not simple to discuss, you know, what people have done in the past. So I put it to you, you have an indescribably complex knowledge domain that you need to make visible. You need to make this thing visible. You need to simplify it down to a visual that people can understand straight away what is going on. And therefore make it thinkable so that we can talk about it. What might offer an initial, overall, general perception of the dynamics of the literature? So these are the questions that we're talking about with coverage. And our first map, here is one example. I have two examples. Here is one example. This is what we call a synchronology. A synchronology is basically an arrangement of items in time. Okay? The time is what we call the timeline, but the whole arrangement is called a synchronology. Basically, what you have here is columns representing particular slices of time and all the papers that were published within that time period. Okay. And inside, you see all the connections, which are the citation links. Okay. Now, you cannot understand this analytically. This is just a general vision. Okay, we'll talk about the little links later. But generally, if you hand this to a banca, they will know what you're talking about. They will see, did you cite Wilson 87? Because that's crucial in your thesis. Here it is. Yes. Did you do that? Did you? Okay, then I'm happy. I can see now that you've actually included what needs to be included. I see you've also included some other papers, which I don't know about. This is going to be interesting. We'll have a discussion about that later. Okay, they see what is going on. Now, as you can see, we have shadings in this particular example. Shadings that distinguish so that you can use visual colors or shadings to show how things change within time. You can also have a different type of synchronology, which is this one here. This one does not start with one particular publication. It starts with 10 publications. And you can see that these are coded in different colors. Why? Because this particular literature is made up of 5 different topics. It's one united literature, but there are 5 topics within it. So now you have a synchronology in time where you actually code the sources for the particular topic that they address. And as you can see in this particular literature, the TP topic is very prevalent, okay, for some reason, which you would then explain in your document. So synchronology is the world map. This is the frontier of what I'm researching. Nothing behind it, nothing in front of it, just this. So your whole thesis now has been situated. Coverage, second set of questions. How might tendencies and trends visually perceptible through a synchronology be enumerated? It's not good enough having just the visual. Give me some stats. That way I can understand a little bit about the dynamics of what I'm seeing through some numbers. To what extent does research in certain periods, you have slices of periods, yeah? To what extent does research in certain periods rely on research from previous periods? Are certain periods more active? Why? And in what terms? To what extent do research outputs from certain periods of time appear fruitful for subsequent periods? So it's the inverse of the previous question. And if the literature is subdivisible into topics, as we saw, how might the tendencies and trends between the topics be enumerated? So here we have a couple of examples that we've been working with. The first thing is called a longitudinally arrayed Adjacency matrix, it's a complicated term. It's based on graph theory. As I said, we are not inventing terms. We're basing everything on things that we know from the literature. And here, for the first map that you saw, is the matrix which shows you, for each time period, how many papers were published in that time period, and where were they cited in the time period. So, 1887 was cited starting in the 1930s, twice, once, 5 times, twice, and so on and so forth. For each period now, how many stuff did they actually cite? The 2000s cited 300 stuff, 300 times. Because these are actual citations. You might have just had 50 papers, but they were cited 300 times. And this is how the subdivision of how they were cited. 18 of these citations were from 1887. 2 of them were from papers in the 1930s, and so on and so forth. And here you have some additional statistics. For instance, the 1960s overall were cited 18 times, and so on and so forth. Okay. For the other synchronology that you saw, the one with the topics, here you have smaller divisions of time, but it's basically the same type of thing that you're showing. So you're showing some basic statistics that describe the visual. Are we okay so far? We're not going to stick to a lot of details. We're just showing you stuff in general. If you want to talk details later, we can talk about it. Okay? Here is a topic matrix. As we saw, one of the synchronologies is divided into topics. How do the topics interrelate? So, for instance, PSMG, this red thing over here, 6 PSMG papers. It has published 11. It has cited 6. It has also been cited by RA once. That topic has cited PSMG once. So if you're dealing with various topics, how are the topics interrelated? What you'll see also is that some topics don't talk to each other, where the zeros are. That's interesting. Why don't these topics talk to each other? Apparently, it's a unified field. Now, you wouldn't know this, because I can tell you from this literature that I have studied for the last 20 years, everybody has been saying, oh, it's unified, everyone cites each other, and you go and you do the analysis, and you can see that there are 0 spaces here. People are not citing each other across the topics. So how unified is this field? As we said, Holton, he said, don't talk about the rhetoric, look at the events. See what is happening with the events. And when you look at what happens with the events, normally you'll find that a lot of people have been fooling you. Things are not what they seem. So building these matrices helps you understand the literature a lot better in that way. More about coverage. How might research outputs from particular time periods be studied, both synchronically and diachronically? I published something today. It's part of everything that's published today. That's synchronic. Yes? Diachronic is across time. Yes? I was confused. I published something today, but I referred to something in the past, and tomorrow I'm going to be cited. That's diachronic. How is that relationship being mapped out? So you can do that. And the other one is related to this. How might the literature be organized for a historical perspective? Okay, here we're talking about history. Why history? If you're going to do a literature review, you are necessarily becoming a historian, whether you like it or not. You are talking about a literature that has evolved in the past 50 years, 100 years, 5 years. The moment you talk about time, you are becoming a historian. So you want to have the means whereby you can map these things in historical terms. And these are the synchronic and diachronic maps, which we call longitudinal extractions for reasons based in mathematics. So here is one example from 1970 to 74. In that synchronology with the various topics, here is what was published in this time period. But it's not only what was published, for instance, in 74, it's also who did they cite from before. So you're seeing what was published synchronically and also who they cited before diachronically. So you're seeing the development of literature until the end of 1974. You could extend this forward if you wish. We haven't done that. We have other means for doing that. But basically, you're taking extractions from particular slices, showing what was published in that time slice, and also what they were citing before. That way you see the evolution of the literature up to the end of 74. Here is the evolution of this other literature in the 1980s. All of the 1980s, what was published here, we have some papers from 1983, 89, 88, but also they cited stuff from 65. So you're extracting from that world map, if you wish, the continents. Yeah, if you want to have a geographical analogy. Yeah. This way, if you in your research, or if someone in the banca wants to stick with 1970-74, there's a map available. So that when they ask you things, you can make sure they're asking about this stuff here and not some other dreamy stuff, but some real stuff here. And when you talk about 70-74, you've got your evidence. You know where to base yourself. Again, this gives confidence to you and also to the banca that you know what you're talking about. Furthermore, if you're going to publish literature review, which you can do, journals accept literature reviews as papers, and you show things like this, they know exactly where you are. And nothing better for an editor of a journal to be sure that the writer knows what they're talking about. So, you have the synchronology, you can extract time slices, see what papers have been published in that time slice, and also the papers that they have cited. That way you get a miniature view of part of the synchronology. Finally, what are the broad citation dynamics of literature? It would be nice to have a little graph that tells you about the broad citation behavior. Who might be the non-citers? Why do they not cite these people? Why are they in the literature and they're not citing anybody? Maybe because they have high prestige. Einstein didn't need to cite anybody. You wouldn't expect to read an Einstein paper with citations. His first papers had 1 or 2 citations that they were citing from the previous papers. Brownian motion and I don't know what. You, on the contrary, are not Einstein. Neither am I. So you better cite the literature that you need to cite. And you suddenly come up with a paper that you're citing, and this guy didn't cite anybody. What makes him special? Why doesn't he have any citations in his paper? So who are the non-citers, those people that don't cite? What are the latest sources in the literature? The ones up front, temporal today. How many of them are there? Why are they important? And here we have a little graph which you can extract from your data, which shows, for instance, 51 citers, 51 papers have 0 citees. In other words, they do not cite anybody. 51. That's a huge number in a scholarly literature. What makes these 51 people special? How can they publish papers without citing anybody? 24 people, citees, have no citers. These are the citees now. Nobody cited them. 24 papers. They're in the literature. Nobody's citing them. Wait a minute. People don't publish papers that are stupid. So maybe there's something here that people have forgotten. Who are these 24 papers? Let's have a look at them. So you use graphs like this to guide you to find from now the data who are these numbers according to particular interests. So far, so good? Here is the review of what we've done so far. Coverage. This is the world map aspect of the atlas. You've got your synchronology, you have your array matrix, your topic matrix, you have a number of longitudinal abstractions. I just showed you a couple. And you have your distribution of citers and citees. Now you have the topical, temporal coverage laid out of your literature. And none of this has been done automatically. There has been no automated software that we've used. All of it is done by the researcher. This is very important. Currently, that will give you this in this particular format and a lot of the other stuff that we've included in this presentation. Sources. Let's talk about sources a little bit. Which are the sources that integrate previous work? So we're talking about people who have integrated previous work, so they are citers who are bringing in a lot of past work. Which are the sources that are useful for getting a grip on the literature? If I'm going to read about something, which is like the first paper I should read? Which sources synthesize the literature or perhaps distill it into schools or movements? In other words, who are the people that have really read the literature and are writing about it so that you can better understand it? These people are the top citers. Top citers are those people that have the most citees in your synchronology. Okay, the people that have the most citees in brackets, the number of citees that these people have. So, if you went to this network, these are the 5 top citees. You want to read about this literature, you better read these people. because they have cited most of the papers in the literature. So you will need to read those papers, definitely, but this will give you a good introduction. Now, without this, how would you know? How would you know which are the top citees so that you could go and read about this literature from these people? Oh, my professor said that I should read this paper. Yeah, based on what criteria? Maybe the guy was his friend. That's not good enough. Maybe he was taught by his professor that this is the paper. How do they know? Unless you've got this sort of analysis, you can't even prove it. So here now you actually have data and the map that tells you this guy here, this is the Mir guy, he cited 52 papers, 52 from a literature of 150. So he's got 1/3 of the literature in his paper. That's a pretty important paper. I should be reading that. Yeah. Notice also the differences, okay, in the top citee networks from these two literatures. This one here is interconnected. Which means what if it's interconnected? These guys acknowledge each other. Yeah? He acknowledges this guy here. He acknowledges this guy here. They are cohesive. Yeah? These guys here, what's going on in this literature? Very strange. Top citers, only one of them talks with the previous one, and it happens to be Sims and Sims. So it's the same people. Yeah? And these guys here, they don't know that they exist. It's a bit more mysterious. There's something else going on here. How would you know that? Before, the rhetoric of this literature is that we're all united. No, you're not. I can prove it to you now. So you wouldn't know that until you actually have the map. I still need to read these people definitely because they have the top they have most citees. So no question about that. But I can also tell you other things about them. Things like these people don't know that each other exists. And that's not a good sign for literature. Why is that going on? There you dig and you find out some reasons. So if they're linked with each other, you have consistency or acknowledgement. Here you go. If they are completely disconnected, like here, you might have discord, you might have incognizance, which means I don't know that you exist. Okay? And if they're disconnected into components, like this is a component here, okay, you might have another connected component there somewhere else. Then you have split foci or all-out divergence. Two different schools of thought, who knows? How would you know that? Unless you have the map. Who are the markers of discovery or invention? Who have gained historical validity? Who are the people that are being cited? Who are the people that are navigating, opening new frontiers? Again, you wouldn't know this for sure until you examine the literature in the network. And here we're talking about the top citees, the people who have been cited the most. Here we go again. You remember this diagram? These are different people now. These are different papers. Similar diagram, okay, which goes to show that this literature is really quite unified in both senses, so citers and citees. Here, the other literature, two components and one isolate. Okay, split foci, divergence, who knows? But you already see that these guys are the top citees because they've been cited 12 times, 16 times, 14 times, 18 times. So again, somebody says to you, "Oh, you got to read this paper. Everyone's talking about this paper." How do you know? You don't know until you see these numbers here. Okay. Now here's an interesting network for you. I've got two examples of this. These guys here in black, yeah, these guys in black are the top citees. Top citees, the people that everyone is talking about, the people that everyone is citing. And this map is saying, if that's a top citee, what's his background? What is his history? Well, his history is here. These are the people that he cited. Now, how did he move the knowledge forward? Oh, these are the guys here that cited him. But not only that, there's another top citee here with his background who is also cited by the same people. So suddenly I'm saying, look, it's not good enough just having a map of top citees. You should have a map of top citees with the historical backgrounds and also the people that have cited them to see if top citees are being cited by the same people. Because if they're not being cited by the same people, then there's obviously a lot of divergence in the literature. How would you know that? You only know it from this sort of map. You have here, for instance, Klinger. Klinger has cited both these top citees, but he hasn't cited the others. Why? If these guys, if all these top citees are so cohesive as we saw in that cohesive little map, then why has he ignored the others? It's a question for research this. These guys here, this guy has cited 4 of the top citees. He's obviously acknowledged the cohesiveness of the top citees. So there's something different going on in this section, this list here, than over here. How would you know that unless you have the map? Let's, here's another one, a little bit more clearer from that other map from the second synchronology. And here we have the top citees in light green, their history in red, and in orange, we have the people that have cited them. Some people have just cited this top citee, others have cited a combination. And you also have these guys in yellow, which are the people that have cited a top citee, but then been cited by a top citee. There's something else going on there. I can tell you now that this map does not exist in the literature. This is an invention of ours. Okay? We have been able to invent a few things. Okay? There's a literature on scientometrics, bibliometrics, literature reviews. Nobody has thought about this. So we're quite proud of this. Thank you very much. It's not good enough telling you the top citees. I want to see their dynamics, their history, who they've cited, and how these combinations of citers are working. Still on the sources, what clusters of citers share similar subject matter? Are useful combinations for studying a particular line of reasoning? Jointly integrate previous work. So they share similar subject matter. They're good for studying a particular line of reasoning, not the whole topic, just a particular line of reasoning, and integrate previous work. Integrate. Okay? So previous work, which means these are citers now. So what are the clusters here? The clusters is what is known as bibliographic couplings. These are pairings of citers. You should read these citers together as a couple based on the citees they share. I'll give you an example. These two guys here, they share 4 citees. Okay? Now, what is 4? It's all relative. Maybe it's a big number, maybe it's a small number. But if it's a relevant enough number in your literature, in the context of your literature, if you're going to study him, you should study him together because they're citing the same people. If you go over here, you have this couple here that are citing 5 citees in common. Why are they citing 5 citees in common? Obviously, they are integrating common work. They are commenting on common work. How are they commenting on it? Are they commenting on it differently, critiquing it differently? Are they united? Do they diverge? How would you know which couples to study correctly if you didn't have maps like this? You wouldn't know. So this is called bibliographic coupling. It's based on citers, couples of citers. They are brought together because they share the same number of citees. You can ask the opposite question, which is what clusters of citees share a common intellectual interest? So you had those citees that we saw before. They're the guys, pushing the knowledge frontiers forward. But what clusters of those should I study together? Not individually, but together. And here you have, let's say, these guys here are 2 citees. They've been cited 6 times. So they have 6 citers in the future. This couple here now, in this time period, 50 to 89, they've been cited 9 times. That's a pretty big number already in any context. So let's find out what these 2 guys have been talking about to be cited 9 times in the future. Why together are they important? Okay, because they've been cited together 9 times, not individually, together. So which pairs of citees should I be studying more than others? And should I be studying these pairs of citees perhaps because they talk about similar things? or different things that people have brought together. Who knows? Okay, so far so good. We're still on sources, okay? What is the chronologically ordered stream of sources that, according to the citation dynamics of literature, appear on a greater number of citation paths than others? This is one of my favorites. I'm going to stick to this just a minute. Now, what is the chronologically ordered backbone of extant research, existing research? One that forms an essential reading list from which informed steps can be taken into the remaining literature. Basically, what is the essential reading list? What should you be reading? Now you go to all your courses. You come to my course. I'm going to give you a reading list. You should actually question that. Professor, how did you come up with that reading list? And I'll tell you, because my masters told me that this is what you should read. I read it, you should read it too. It's not good enough. It's not good enough anymore. What does the literature tell me I should be reading? What does my synchronology tell me I should be reading? You know, you're just a researcher, me, you, okay? Just a professor, you write some papers, fine, but what does the literature in itself tell me I should be reading? What is the essential reading list that I can extract from that synchronology? How would you extract it? Well, if everyone's talking about a particular paper, it's going to have a high value. Talking about a particular research link from one paper to another, it's going to have a high value. Can I extract these high value papers, these high value links, and have a chronologically ordered stream from beginning to end? So I can have a subset of papers that cover the entire time period, and they're all linked as well. That would be my essential reading list. You'll see what I'm saying here? Yes? Take the synchronology, extract from it the highly valued papers from beginning to end, connected one to another. This is called a main path analysis. There's a particular technique for doing that. Let's stick with this one first over here. And we see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 papers that you should start with from 1887 to about 1947. Then you go to 1983, 1985, 1995, 98, and you keep on going until you reach the endpoints, which are 1, 2, 3 endpoints. These are 19 papers based on literature of about 160, if I remember correctly. So your literature is 160 papers. Oh God, 160 papers. Just give me a condensed version. Here it is. Here's the version that you should stick with for the next 2 weeks. After that, you will study the rest. How would you know? How would you know for sure which is the essential reading list unless you do this? You wouldn't know. You'd have to take the professor's word for it, or whoever else has told you that this is the reading list. That's not good enough. You should be able to make that judgment. And an objective way of making that judgment is to do a main path analysis, which is the extraction of all the high-valued items from beginning to end. Here's another from the second synchronology. Now, you remember this synchronology had 5 topics. Yes, do you remember that? How many codes do you see here? 2. So I have a literature made up of 5 topics, but the only important papers, the high-valued papers, come from the 2 topics. There's something really strange going on here. How would you know that? Only through this. Also, what you see is that Checklin. Who is this Checklin guy? Why is he dominating the literature so much? It's very strange. And if this is the essential reading list and it's all about Checklin, then really, what does that say about the rest of the literature? You know? And maybe I should be thinking that main path analysis is good in some contexts. There's a little variety here. But in some other contexts, it's not good enough. Maybe main path analysis should be developed a bit better. Okay? So here's a situation where we have an answer, but we're not happy with it. We means Joaquin and I. Yeah? We like it. It's nice. You know, for some literatures, it works. For others, it doesn't. But at least it gives you a starting point, and then we can see how we can develop this particular method. So, summary of sources, top citers, top citees, the radar network, which was about the top citees, the clustering of the citers, the clustering of the citees, and the main path. So far, so good?
Yes.
Okay, we'll finish off with some points about media. You have to know some things about the media. The journals, the publishers. Which authors publish where? Which authors publish across different media? Because an author, you and me, if we always publish in the same journal, that's fine, that's okay. But what people value, what the literature values most is authors who publish across media. Because what does this show? It shows that you can communicate to different audiences. And you can also find bits and pieces of your research which are good for one audience, better for another audience, and so on and so forth. You can see how to divide your research into different audiences. This is a good thing to do. You're not here just to talk to me all the time. You want to talk to Joaquin, you want to talk to Eli, you want to talk to your neighbor. Okay? So it's the same thing with research. We want to publish across journals, either within our field is made up of various journals, or across fields, if we can manage that. That's even better if you're interdisciplinary in that sense. Everyone's saying that interdisciplinarity is a good thing. Let's try and do it. Let's try and publish in different journals across different fields. So this is where you find the author's media network. So the red is the author, the orange is the medium, and here you find, for instance, that this journal, which changed its name 3 times, which is why we have these acronyms, journals change their names, has got 31 authors. Big. This is big in this field. This little journal here has only got 1 author in this field. Actually, the Strategic Management Journal is quite an important journal, but in this field, it's not that important. It's only got 1 author. This author here, called Eden, he has published in 13 different journals. Hence the links to all these other journals. Whereas this guy has published only in 6. Now, this was the Checklin guy. He was important back there, but look, he's not very interdisciplinary, is he? So how does this work out? How come this guy is important, but he doesn't publish across many journals? How come this guy never showed up, but he's highly interdisciplinary? What is going on here in this literature? How would you know? So here we have a map that allows you to explore things based on the journals where the authors have published. Second set of questions. How many authors publish in a particular medium? And of these, how many publish in other media? One of the most popular media or important media of the literature. So here we have a media network. Let's start with this one here. Large, important journal in this particular field. Okay? 35, is that 35 or 95? Yeah, see on the screen. 95. 95 authors published in this journal, of which one of them published in this journal, that's on the line, 2 of them published in that journal, 1 of them published in that journal. Also, this journal has 6, of which 2 of them published in this journal. So in the lines, you see the common authors between the journals. How would you know how important this journal is in the field? Oh, I know it is. It's obvious. This is about public administration. The Public Administration Review is important. It's an important journal. But how important? That's the question. It's not about whether it's important. Everybody knows it's important. How important? Well, here you see how important it is. Not only in terms of the number of authors, but also how these authors have published across other journals, related journals. So you're contextualizing the importance of this journal. How would you be able to do that without this? Up here, the media map for this field is huge. It's too big to put into one map. So here we have an extract with a number of common authors. In other words, on the lines is greater than or equal to 3. Okay, so there's that big journal there with 31 authors, of which 4 have published there, and vice versa, 4 have published there. Okay, so you have an extracted map because it's too big. You could have the rest of the map in an appendix if you wish. Yeah. So media network. Second set of questions. How is the literature distributed across the media? It's no good telling me what the media is. I want to know how many papers are published in every medium. So this distribution. What debates are evident in the respective literature? So here we have, let's say, top 7 journals. Top 7 journals that represent 55% of the literature. It's always good to know what 50% or above, what percentage of the papers are in what journals. And here we have 25%, 1/4 of the entire literature is in this journal. Well, that's pretty important. Okay. But then you have all these other percentages which are smaller, but together add up to 25% that are in these journals. How would you know which journals to read? My professor told me. Again, that's not good enough. You need to know which journals to read. How do you know? From the extraction from the basic data, from the synchronology of things like this. And it gives you the amount of papers in the column, and the dashes are the percentage of papers of the network. Okay? And in total here, the top 7 journals, they are the top 7 because they're over 50% of all the sources in the network. In this field, I put it to you because I know the field very well. Everybody knows about this journal. Everybody. Nobody knows about this. And it's the second most important journal. You know? So, I mean, you learn something here about your field. Media. What is a particular medium? What is a particular medium's evolving share of a literature sources? So here we're talking about the evolution. Take a very important journal. Oh, it's published 95 authors. Oh, it's published 50 papers. Yeah, but across time, across the time period of my synchronology, how has that volume changed? Is it going up today or is it going down? It's important to know the status of your favorite journal, historically and also today. So here we have what we call a media contextualized evolutionary distribution of sources. It's a crappy title. We're still trying to find a better title. Okay? But basically what you're saying is put all the number of papers in their time periods, but then give me a curve that shows the percentage of these papers published in my favorite journal. Over here, you see that the top journal was actually increasing by the end of your synchronology. So that's fine. That's what you would expect from a top journal. Here, it's decreasing. Something's happening here. Then you have to figure out why. Okay? So here, you would think, oh, okay, there's nothing to research here. That's fine. There's definitely something to research here. Why are people stopping to publish in the Public Administration Review on this topic that this concerns? Why? That's very unusual. People do not stop to publish in the Public Administration Review. It's a top journal. So obviously there's something going on there. Maybe the editors have decided this topic is no longer of interest. Maybe the authors have decided I'm not being given the proper airtime that I need in this journal. I'm going to go to other journals. Why is this going down? Also, what you have here are curves from the 2 major competitors. Now, this guy in the black curve over here obviously had a little bit of a tough time over here, but by this time, the competition has withered away. Okay? So again, you can add curves for other journals to see how have they tried to beat the top journal and have they succeeded or not. Okay? All this gives you an idea about the publishing dynamics of this field. And you need to know about that if you're going to talk with authority about this field. It's not just about, George, you published a great paper. Yeah, fine. But, what about that journal? What is that journal doing? Who are these other guys publishing in that journal? What is the context of Georgiou's paper? Unless you know the context, you really only know half the story. So that's the summary of the media network. Okay, you have the author's media. Okay, you have the media, just the journals, with the links between them to show the common authors. The distribution of the sources across media, the top 7 journals that we saw. And you have the evolutionary distribution of your favorite journal in the context of the papers of the field. In summary, basically, this is what you have. If you want to understand the structure of the subject, you need to do this. Build an atlas in 3 sections, and within each section, you have these maps or descriptive statistics. Just like you go and you buy your National Geographic Atlas, and it has sections and statistics, and text, you will have here sections, maps, text, conclusions, and all this in your atlas. In fact, I put it to you, your chapter on the literature review, or chapters, because usually it's chapters, is this. Thank you for your attention.
you are beyond the time.
We are beyond time.
Yeah, because I think
Oh,
students
gosh.
have some class now, and so very thank you for your presentation. It's very clear, and I think it's a kind of knowledge that professors has a test view, but now it's very structured, step by step, how to connect all this information for a literature review. And one question: which software did you use to analyze this data?
It's called PAGEC.
Project.
PAGEC. PAGEC is a network analysis software, which is not automated. You have to use it actively. I call it a network calculator, because you actually have to punch in the stuff. So it requires active involvement from the researcher, and that for me is crucial. You have to be actively involved in your research, and it's in my mind the most powerful network software that's available, and it's free.
Can you spell that, PAGEC?
PAJEK. If you want to talk about PAGEC, see me later. I know everything you need to know.
You're afraid to ask.
Yes.
Okay.
Since we're out of time, if you want to talk to me, we'll talk in the corner.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Thank you again, and students can talk to you later. Okay.